the execution of Marion Bowman Jr. Justice or a flawed system? On May 12, 2023, South Carolina resumed executions after more than a decade of legal and logistical delays with the death of Marion Bowman Jr. via lethal injection. Bowman's execution became a flashpoint in the ongoing heated debate about capital punishment in America. On the surface, one might call this a straightforward narrative about justice served, a man convicted of a brutal murder paying the ultimate price. However, beneath this surface lies a story that pulls back the veil on a complex web of legal controversies, systemic flaws, and ethical dilemmas. This video invites true crime enthusiasts to delve deeper into the case of Marion Bowman Jr., not simply as another execution chronicled in America's fraught history with the death penalty, but as an important example of the cracks in our justice system. Did Bowman receive the justice he deserved, or was his case emblematic of broader failings within our courts and society? Let's break it down. On May 14, 2001, the life of 43-year-old Candy Martin came to a tragic and violent end. Her bound and gagged body was found in her home in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Evidence suggested that she had been strangled to death, a horrifying scene that shocked the community. Candy Martin was described by those who knew her as kind and full of life, making her loss all the more devastating for her family and friends. Police investigations quickly zeroed in on Marion Bowman Jr., a local man with a prior criminal record, as the prime suspect. Witnesses placed him near the crime scene, and circumstantial evidence painted a picture of his alleged involvement. Despite his protests of innocence, Bowman was arrested, setting off a legal saga that would stretch for over 2 decades. But there's an important question to ask here. Was this investigation as cut and dry as it seemed? And more importantly, were the methods used to convict Bowman fair? Bowman's trial in 2006 focused on witness testimony and a narrative constructed by the prosecution that depicted him as the cold-blooded killer of Candy Martin. Several of Bowman's alleged accomplices, who were also suspects in the case, pled out in exchange for lesser sentences. In other words, they negotiated their way out of greater liability by implicating Bowman, raising serious questions about the reliability of their testimony. The prosecution presented their plea deals as routine legal tools, but to Bowman and his defense, they were tantamount to coercion. Were these witnesses truthful, or simply saying what was necessary to save their own skin? It's a reality of the justice system. Plea bargains are frequently used, but they raise significant ethical issues, especially in life-or-death cases. Bowman maintained his innocence throughout the trial, claiming the system was stacked against him from the start. Many observers, particularly advocates for criminal justice reform, have pointed out patterns of racial bias in cases like this, where Black defendants are disproportionately sentenced to death compared to their white counterparts. The jury ultimately voted for the death penalty, sealing Bowman's fate. For advocates of the death penalty, this was justice being carried out. For others, including Bowman, this was a flawed conviction with unexamined elements. From 2010 to 2023, South Carolina saw no executions carried out, despite multiple inmates sitting on death row with finalized appeals. The delay was not due to moral reconsideration, but logistical barriers. Namely, the state struggled to obtain the drugs necessary for lethal injection. This pause played directly into Bowman's case, providing him with an extended stay while lawmakers scrambled to find solutions to an increasingly contentious issue. Enter the SHIELD law, passed as a solution to these logistical problems. This law allows South Carolina to conceal the names of companies supplying lethal injection drugs, shielding them from public scrutiny. From a legal standpoint, proponents argued that this law was essential for resuming executions and preventing pharmaceutical companies from facing backlash. Critics, however, see it differently. SHIELD laws have been attacked for their lack of transparency, opening the door to potentially unsafe or unregulated drug protocols being used to end someone's life. When South Carolina formally adopted its SHIELD law, the doors reopened for Marion Bowman Jr.'s execution date to be scheduled. Was the secrecy necessary, or did it signal a dangerous precedent in diminishing oversight of such a profound act? As Bowman's execution date loomed, his legal team filed appeals advocating for clemency. The team highlighted questions about the validity of witness testimony, potential racial bias in death penalty sentencing, and concerns over the transparency of execution protocols. Despite their efforts, clemency was denied, and the courts upheld Bowman's death sentence. Reflecting on his situation, Bowman expressed profound messages in his writing, including a poetic piece titled "Last Breath or Sigh," which he shared before his execution. These writings revealed a man grappling with the weight of the justice system, human suffering, and mortality. Though his guilt remains the central focus for the state, his reflections expose something deeper. Whether or not someone believes in his innocence, his case challenges us to think critically about how capital punishment operates in practice. At 6:30 p.m. on May 12th, Marion Bowman Jr. was executed by lethal injection. His final words echoed his broader criticisms of the criminal justice system. Our nation commits to justice, yet struggles to deliver it equally. Bowman's death brings us to a critical question about the mechanics of executions in South Carolina and the nation at large. The drugs used in his lethal injection were acquired under the state's new SHIELD law. While the procedure appeared to proceed without incident, the use of SHIELD laws leaves a lingering ethical problem. Without transparency, it becomes impossible to ensure that these protocols meet accepted medical and ethical standards. Critics argue that SHIELD laws shift the focus away from accountability. On the other hand, proponents insist that these laws are a necessary compromise to continue enforcing capital punishment. This creates a tension between the legal framework that allows for executions and the moral high ground that demands transparency. These contradictions overshadow Bowman's case, forcing us to examine more than just his guilt or innocence. Instead, it compels us to question how executions are carried out and why public oversight is increasingly absent from the conversation. Lawyers and advocates analyzing Bowman's situation have pointed to numerous systemic injustices that may have influenced the outcome of his case. 3 significant points stand out. The role of plea deals in capital cases. Witnesses who testify against defendants in exchange for lighter sentences have a vested interest in presenting evidence favorable to the prosecution. This creates an inherent bias. Were Bowman's rights adequately protected when such deals were made? Racial disparities in death penalty sentencing. The death penalty disproportionately affects Black defendants. Studies show that Black individuals accused of killing white victims are more likely to face the death penalty than others. Bowman's defenders frequently raised this issue in the years leading up to his execution, arguing that systemic bias could have influenced his sentence. Secrecy in execution protocols. The SHIELD law that facilitated Bowman's execution has been criticized as a step backward for transparency. In cases of life and death, accountability is paramount. Yet, South Carolina's law undermines public trust by diminishing oversight. Together, these points paint a troubling picture, not just for Bowman's case, but for capital punishment as a whole. Are we confident in a system that allows for these complexities and potential oversights, especially when the stakes are this high? Marion Bowman Jr.'s guilt or innocence remains a matter of firm belief for those on either side of this case. For Candy Martin's surviving family members, his execution likely brought a sense of closure. For death penalty opponents and criminal justice reform advocates, it reopened discussions about fairness, bias, and the ethics of state-sanctioned deaths. Execution is the most final of acts. There is no correcting a mistake once the penalty has been carried out. In a system riddled with imperfections, how comfortable can we be with such finality? Bowman's voice from death row speaks to this question. True justice begins when we see the cracks in our own foundation. As we end this journey into the execution of Marion Bowman Jr., we must ask ourselves, was justice served, or were we witness to a system that failed a man it was sworn to protect? Bowman was neither the first nor last to raise these questions, but his case forces us to reckon with a stark truth. The cracks in the justice system affect us all. The story doesn't end simply with a date or a final breath. Instead, it invites us to grapple with difficult realities about equity, ethics, and the law in America. For true crime enthusiasts and justice advocates alike, Bowman's case remains a powerful lens into the broader workings of criminal justice. What are your thoughts? Comment below and join the discussion. Justice demands accountability from everyone. This script provides a critical edge, making it ideal for true crime enthusiasts who tend to value detailed narrative and thought-provoking analysis. Let me know if you'd like adjustments or further details.